Hi, I'm Ellen. My sister banned me from her wedding after I paid for almost everything, over $20,000. No warning, no explanation, just a text saying I wasn't welcome. But that wasn't the worst part. What hurt more was realizing it wasn't just about the wedding, it was the pattern. The years of quiet dismissal, of being useful but never visible. They used my name, my money, my kindness, and then erased me like I was never there. And when I finally said no, everything exploded. Why did they turn the whole family against me? And what did I do in return? The first text came just after 9 a.m. I was standing by the window, holding my coffee with one hand, absently stirring with the other. The November sky outside was heavy, gray, still, the kind of quiet that makes you brace for a storm, even if none ever comes. My phone buzzed on the counter. Kimbra. Hey, it might be best if you don't come to the wedding, for everyone's peace. At first, I thought maybe she sent it to the wrong person. I even blinked twice, like maybe that would make the words rearrange themselves into something less absurd. It didn't. I stared at the message for a long time. The longer I looked, the colder my skin felt, like the heat had drained from my hands, and then from the air itself. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I just stood there, coffee untouched, until it went lukewarm. It wasn't until I sat back down on the couch that it really hit me. That wasn't a suggestion. That was a disinvitation. My own sister, who I had helped plan every damn detail of this wedding, had decided I didn't belong at the table. I clicked open the wedding website. Months ago, Kimbra asked me to help her build it, because I understood layout better. She wanted something clean, elegant, tasteful, not cheap and desperate like those other brides, she'd said. I remembered her laughing when she said that. Laughing while I sat behind the screen putting it all together. I scrolled to the guest list. My name wasn't there, not even in the maybe section. I checked again. Maybe it was a mistake. It wasn't. I remembered paying the venue deposit back in spring, $3,500 wired from my account, because Mom said they didn't want to burden Kimbra during her creative project phase. I remembered paying for her third dress fitting, because the second one was a disaster and she deserved to feel beautiful. And the honeymoon suite? That was my doing too. She didn't know I upgraded it. I wanted her to have something memorable. Now, I wasn't even getting a seat in the back row. I sat there, unmoving, my eyes locked on the glowing screen. My own sister had erased me from her celebration like I was an editing error. And no one thought to check in. Not Mom, not Dad. Not even a generic, "This is awkward but let's talk" from Kimbra. Just silence. Like I'd never existed in the first place. My memory started rewinding, as if looking for answers in the archives. Every time she had thanked me, it came with a condition. "You're the best. Just don't post about it, okay?" Or, "Let's keep it between us. I want the family to think I pulled this off." I had played along because, well, I didn't need credit. I thought I was being supportive. But looking back now, it wasn't about humility. It was about control. She didn't want to share the stage, even in spirit. Kimbra didn't want me there because she had spent months rewriting the story where I didn't exist, just a quiet wallet in the background. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with something colder, firmer. Not rage. Not yet. Just understanding. I opened my banking app, scrolled past the usual stuff. There they were, all the payments related to her wedding. $3,500. The venue, $2,700. The dress fittings, $1,800. Florist initial deposit, $450. Hair and makeup trial. And those were just the ones I could remember. There were more, dozens of little things I'd agreed to pay for because we're family and this matters. Another buzz lit up my phone. Kimbra again. "I hope you understand. Let's not make this about money." That line pulled something loose inside me. Not anger, not the kind that makes you yell. This was the kind of anger that sat down, crossed its arms, and started planning. I set my phone face down on the table. I could still feel it vibrating, one buzz after another. But I didn't flip it over. Instead, I got up, walked over to the cabinet, and pulled out my old notebook, the one I hadn't opened in years. I started writing, not a speech, not a message, a record of every dollar, every favor, every moment I'd said yes when I could have said no. Because if they were going to pretend I wasn't part of this, I was going to show them what it cost to erase me. Once I filled 2 full pages in that notebook, I closed it slowly, like sealing something dangerous back in its cage. The air in the room hadn't changed, but something in me had. I was done reacting. I needed to see the full picture now, not just the wound, but the knife. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table and curled up in the armchair by the window. The old radiator hissed quietly behind me, giving off just enough heat to fight the creeping cold. I opened Kimbra's wedding website again. I hadn't visited it in weeks, not since I helped set it up. I designed every section, the RSVP page, the custom banner, the navigation tabs. It had been our little secret, or so she'd said. Now I wasn't even sure she remembered I built it at all. I clicked on the bridal party section. The first photo was of Kimbra and her maid of honor, someone named Haley, a friend from some retreat she'd gone to during a business incubator program. They'd only known each other 2 years. But there she was, arms linked with Kimbra, captioned as, "My soul sister, my rock, the one who's been through everything with me." I scrolled, searching for something, anything, not even a special thanks to my family, not a whisper of my name. I wasn't a footnote. I was non-existent. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the rewrite, a careful, curated deletion, one that told me this wasn't an oversight. It was a pattern I hadn't wanted to see before. That same night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. I opened a folder from years ago, photos from a family trip to Savannah. I had booked the hotel, paid for gas, even brought the backup battery packs because Mom always forgot hers. At the time, I thought it was normal. Now I clicked through the pictures they posted afterward, the ones that ended up in Mom's digital photo frame. I wasn't in most of them. And the few I was in? I was blurry, cropped, or facing away from the camera. I remembered that slideshow Kimbra and Marva played at our cousin's baby shower. It was supposed to be a family memory reel. They narrated each photo, laughing, reminiscing. My name never came up. I had taken many of those pictures. I had funded most of the trip, but apparently I had only been there to press the shutter button. I felt my face tighten as I sat there in the dark, lit only by the soft blue of the screen. Maybe they didn't even notice. Maybe it was just easier for them to build their narrative without me in it. A few days later, I attended Kimbra's bridal shower. I hadn't planned to go, but Marva insisted. She said, "Just show your face. It's important to be supportive, even if you're not front and center." I stood in the back while Kimbra made her speech. Her voice rang through the boutique tea shop they'd rented for the event. Charming but refined, she called it. I remember that because it was the same phrase I used months ago when helping her draft her theme. She stood there, a crystal flute in hand, and said, "I couldn't have done this without my mom. Every detail, every dream, I owe to her. She's made it all possible." I didn't flinch, not visibly, but inside, I could feel something press hard behind my ribs. She looked right past me. No mention of the fact that I handled all her vendor contracts. No mention that I floated her first 3 dress appointments. Nothing, just, "Thanks, Mom." I thought about raising my hand. Not to interrupt, but maybe just to remind her. Maybe a subtle joke like, "And who set up the RSVP system again?" But I stayed quiet, because silence had become my place. Not asked for, but assigned. Back home, later that night, I sat in bed with my notes app open. I wrote one sentence. I wasn't invisible, I was edited out. I read it twice before locking the phone and setting it down. The truth of it felt heavier than any insult I'd ever been handed, because it wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being removed. It wasn't just this wedding. It was the last 10 years. Every birthday where I took the photo instead of being in it. Every holiday meal where I handled dishes while they posed for family shots. Every time Mom praised Kimbra's resilience while I was working overtime to cover her bounce checks. I used to think that's just how families worked. Now I realized that's just how they worked me. I stood up and walked to my small printer tucked beneath my desk. The light blinked as it warmed up. I scrolled through each email, invoice, PayPal receipt, and text screenshot I'd archived. One by one, I hit print. These weren't just receipts anymore. They were proof that I existed. Proof that I gave, over and over, without asking for applause. And now, I wasn't asking anymore. I stacked the printed receipts on my dining table, each page still warm from the printer. Watching the pile grow gave me a strange sense of calm, like I was building something solid for the first time in months. Something that couldn't be rewritten or ignored. Something that said, I was here. It was mid-morning when I finally stepped away from the table to pour myself a fresh cup of coffee. That's when my phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. Hi, this is Justine from the Palmetto Gardens in Charleston. We're finalizing the extended guest count for the Langley Hunter wedding. Since the reservation is still under your name, we just need confirmation by noon today. Thanks. My name. I grabbed my laptop again, heart starting to pick up. I pulled up my email and searched Palmetto Gardens. Dozens of threads popped up, some CC'd to Kimbra, others to vendors I didn't even recognize. I opened the most recent one. The reservation was active, and my full name and contact details were front and center. Ellen L. Grant, primary signatory. I hadn't spoken to that venue since February, when I first paid the deposit. Back then, it was just a placeholder, something I agreed to put under my name until Kimbra figured out her credit limit situation. Apparently, she decided to never figure it out. I clicked into the florist's confirmation next. Same story. Then the catering company. Same. The entertainment booking. Same. Everything was under me. My stomach turned, not from fear, but from the sick feeling of being taken for a fool. Scrolling further, I found a scanned PDF labeled Langley Wedding Catering Form. I opened it. It had my digital signature, my initials, even the same style of date stamp I used on work documents. Only, I hadn't signed it. I'd never even seen this form. Whoever had forged it knew just enough to make it look real. They'd copied my signature from another document, I could tell. The slant was too perfect, the spacing too precise. I closed my laptop and stepped outside for air. The street was quiet, save for a few distant leaf blowers and the dull hum of a neighbor's mower. I walked slowly down the block, thinking back to how many times I'd heard, "You're so good with details," or "It's just easier if you handle it." No one ever said, "Thank you." They just expected. Back inside, I sat down at the table and texted Trula. "Did you get that email from Kimbra's planner? The one she copied you on by mistake?" A few minutes passed before she replied. "Yeah. Weird part is, there's an email from you on it." My fingers froze. "What do you mean from me?" Trula screenshotted it and sent it over. Subject: "All good now, thanks." Body: "Hi, this is Ellen. I just want to clarify that everything is fine now. Please go ahead with all planned arrangements." I never wrote that. The email address was close to mine, but not exact. An extra letter thrown in, one most people wouldn't notice. Someone, likely Kimbra or Mom, had created a fake account, sent a message pretending to be me, and forwarded it to a vendor to keep everything moving. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, but not with panic. With clarity. This wasn't just manipulation. This was impersonation, fraud even. And they expected me to stay silent, to keep being the good one, the invisible pillar holding everything up while they smiled for the camera. I opened a blank page on my laptop and started listing every vendor involved. Venue, catering, photographer, florist, DJ. One by one, I pulled the invoices, cross-checked the totals, and attached screenshots. No rage, no tears, just the meticulous work of someone who'd had enough. Then, I drafted an email, not to anyone else, but to myself. Subject: Termination of responsibility, Charleston wedding event. Message: Effective immediately. I am no longer liable for services I did not authorize or contracts I did not sign. All vendor arrangements made using my identity without direct consent are considered null from my end. Any charges incurred moving forward are not my responsibility. I saved it in a secure folder. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step. Not out of spite, but because it was time. They'd used my name freely, carelessly. If they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, they'd soon understand the cost of that fantasy. The next morning came without ceremony. The air in my apartment felt unusually still, like even the walls were holding their breath. I had slept, but not restfully, just enough to keep going. By 8:30, I was at my desk, the wedding venue portal already loaded on the screen. I stared at the reservation summary. There it was, my name at the top, still listed as the primary contact. Still the one responsible for every penny. A bright yellow button at the bottom blinked, "Cancel reservation." I hovered over it for just a second. No flashbacks, no doubt. I clicked. A message popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this event? Non-refundable deposit will be forfeited." I hit confirm. The screen flashed. A confirmation number appeared. And that was that. $6,000. Gone. Not refunded, not credited. Gone. I knew what that meant for them. I also knew it wasn't my mess to fix anymore. I leaned back, my chair letting out a soft creak, and closed the tab. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt final. Within the next hour, I moved on to the rest. I drafted a quick message to the photographer. "Please remove any shared files or previews tied to the Langley Hunter event. My contract is voided, and I will not be responsible for any remaining balance." Then the honeymoon resort. I am not the guest of record. The booking was processed with my details without full authorization. Cancel immediately. Next, the florist. Please do not proceed with any further arrangements or deliveries for the Langley Hunter wedding. Orders were placed under my name, but without proper consent. Cancel and confirm termination of service. Every email ended the same way. No services were authorized with my full consent. Short, direct. Enough to hold up in court, if it came to that. By noon, it was done. All of it. My inbox quieted. For the first time in weeks, there were no pending contracts or vendor messages blinking red. I felt something shift, not relief, release. Around 2, my phone started buzzing. "Mom!" lit up the screen. I let it ring, no hesitation. It rang again. Then came the text. "Did you really cancel the venue? Kimbra is losing her mind. Call me, now." I read it, set the phone face down on the table, and walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, sipped slowly, then returned to the couch. My journal was still where I left it the night before. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "They gave me silence for years. I'm just giving it back." The words felt heavier than they looked, but they were true. My family had always found comfort in pretending my help came with no boundaries, no voice, no conditions. I had finally introduced one. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the pine trees outside my window, I opened a new document, Financial Disengagement Statement. I listed every item, venue, florist, catering, travel accommodations, next to dates and amounts. Then, I added timestamps of text confirmations and screenshots of payment receipts. The total was sobering, even to me. At the bottom, I wrote in bold, "Effective immediately, I withdraw all financial responsibility tied to the Langley Hunter wedding. Any ongoing obligations or unresolved balances must be redirected to the responsible parties." I printed 2 copies. One went into my personal file drawer. The other I sealed in an envelope, blank on the front. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Mail it, hand it over in person, maybe even shred it. But for now, it was a symbol. A symbol that I was no longer the one holding everything up. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed as dusk gave way to full dark, the room glowing softly from a single lamp. My hands were still, my heartbeat even. There were no tears, no fury, only certainty. I didn't need to scream to be heard. And I didn't owe them the courtesy of warning shots. The next morning, I didn't wake up to the sound of birds or an alarm. I woke up to a flood of notifications lighting up my phone like a broken faucet. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail, all demanding something from me. I didn't check them right away. I sat there in bed, blanket pulled halfway up my chest, letting the vibration echo across the nightstand. It felt like the universe was vibrating too. Eventually, I reached for the phone and tapped on the first voicemail. It was from Marva. Her voice was sharp, like it had been rehearsed. "Do you realize what you've done? Kimbra's in tears. She hasn't stopped shaking since last night. She said the venue pulled out, the florist, the planner's threatening to quit. What were you thinking, Ellen?" Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she even pretend to wonder how I got to this point. I closed the message and moved on to the next. It was from Aunt Lisa. "That was a low blow, Ellen. You blindsided your sister during the most important week of her life." Then Uncle Ron chimed in. "You couldn't let her have this one moment? Just one?" And then the text messages. "That was cruel. You made your point. Happy now? I used to think better of you." There it was, the family consensus. Ellen the villain. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed air. I made coffee. Black, no sugar. Something grounding. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened the family group chat, the one we only used for holiday coordination and baby pictures. It had become a war zone overnight. Someone had posted screenshots of the canceled vendor emails, the venue cancellation. A cousin I barely spoke to added a passive-aggressive emoji reaction. Kimbra hadn't written anything directly, but she didn't have to. Her friends did it for her. One message stood out, from my mother's older brother, a man who once told me I was the steady one. "Your sister's wedding was your chance to show up for this family, but you chose to make it about yourself." That was the one that broke the silence. I typed back, "I did show up, with $20,000, and not one seat in return. No emojis, no qualifiers, just the truth." The message stayed there for a minute. Then it was followed by more noise, the kind that doesn't ask for understanding, only obedience. I muted the thread. Trula texted not long after. "Heard the chat exploded. I'm proud of you." That stopped me for a second. She and I met in college. She once said I had middle child energy, even though I was the youngest. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You're the kind that makes sure everyone gets a slice before taking one yourself." I remembered the night she got a notice for overdue rent. I paid it, no questions. She cried. I told her to just keep going. She never forgot that. "You've always held people up," her text continued. "They're just mad now that you let go." It was strange how one person could say 10 words and make you feel like you hadn't lost everything after all. I texted her back a simple thanks. That night, I didn't do much. I heated up a can of lentil soup, sliced up some crackers, and let soft jazz fill the silence in my apartment. No news, no social media, no updates from the people suddenly so invested in my moral standing. I sat with my dinner, warm spoon in hand, and just listened. To the music, to the quiet, to my own thoughts. They think silence is surrender. They don't realize it's armor. People like Marva and Kimbra operate best in performance mode. Everything is curated. Public applause, picture-perfect moments, the illusion of unity. But they don't know what to do when the audience stops clapping. When someone walks off stage, refuses the role, and says, "I'm done playing this character." They expected me to keep feeding the machine, quietly, forever. But I was done. By 9 p.m., I turned my phone off entirely. Not airplane mode, Off. I didn't need another notification, another ping of someone trying to be the bigger person, just long enough to shame me back into line. I brushed my teeth, changed into flannel pajamas, and sat at the edge of my bed, same as I had the night before. The envelope I'd sealed still sat on the dresser, untouched. My chest felt lighter, not because the storm was over, but because I had finally stopped trying to calm it. Let them tell their version. I was done auditioning for a seat in someone else's story. By morning, the sky outside had softened from black to a muted blue, like the world was trying to reset itself. I moved quietly through my apartment, making coffee and opening the blinds just wide enough to let the light in, but not so wide that it felt like an invitation. I didn't need the day's judgment. I just needed time. I turned on my laptop and clicked into a clean folder I created the night before. I named it exactly what it was: Wedding Liabilities, Kimbra, Marva. No sugarcoating, no euphemisms, just facts. The first thing I added was the PDF of my financial disengagement letter. Then came the screenshots, bank transfers, confirmation emails, contracts, and the forged digital signature from the catering company. I wasn't building a case out of spite. I was archiving truth. I included the fake email too, the one supposedly from me that reassured vendors everything was fine. The subtle typo in the Gmail address, the casual tone that didn't sound like me at all, it was all there. By the time I finished, the folder had over 40 documents. I created a cover page that read, Statement of Misuse, Summary of Unauthorized Use of Financial Identity. It felt sterile, legal, necessary. I uploaded the entire folder to an encrypted drive and sent it to Dara Sloan, a lawyer I had worked with once before during a property dispute years back. She wasn't flashy, she didn't posture, she just got things done. Within an hour, she replied, "Got it, sit tight, I'll draft the formal letter." While I waited, I walked 2 blocks down to the mailbox and dropped in a few bills. The crisp cold felt good on my skin. It reminded me I was here, not some invisible assistant behind the scenes of someone else's life. Back home, I refreshed my inbox. Subject line: Unlawful misrepresentation and unauthorized financial commitment. It was bold, black, and perfectly worded. Dara had addressed it to both Kimbra and Marva. In 3 succinct pages, she outlined the extent of the misrepresentation, demanded a written acknowledgement of misuse, and provided 30 days to return the total misappropriated funds. The final paragraph made me sit up straighter. Failure to respond within the stated period will result in immediate escalation through formal legal channels. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't scared. I was steady. I forwarded the letter to my personal email, added it to the evidence folder, and backed it up to 2 separate drives. Later that afternoon, as I sat reading by the window, a push notification from Instagram flashed across my phone. Kimbra had posted a new story, a grainy black and white photo of her looking out a window, the caption reading, "Some people would rather burn everything than be happy for others." I rolled my eyes. Classic. She didn't tag me, of course. That would require her to admit publicly that this had anything to do with me. No, this was the kind of passive-aggressive performance she was so good at, just enough for her followers to offer pity, just vague enough to deny when confronted. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I opened a new email and typed, "Hi, please remove my name and contact information from all current communications regarding the Langley Hunter event. Legal notice attached." I sent it directly to the wedding planner, CC'd Dara, and attached the cease and desist. There was no satisfaction in the click, just confirmation that a boundary had finally been drawn. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marva. Not a call. An email. Subject: Talk? The message was short. "Can we handle this without all the paperwork? You're blowing this way out of proportion. Let's be reasonable." Reasonable. I read the message twice, the second time slower. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the email as a PDF and added it to the folder. Because when someone calls your silence convenient and your boundaries dramatic, they're not asking for peace. They're asking for permission to keep exploiting you. I closed my laptop, walked into the kitchen, and filled a glass with water. The sun was already low, casting long golden lines across the countertop. I stood there for a minute, just breathing. They wanted a quiet servant. What they got was a silent record keeper. They built their story on assumptions, pity, and polished facades. I built mine with receipts. The kettle's whistle faded into the quiet of the kitchen as I carried my tea back to the desk. The last orange thread of sunlight had slipped below the ridgeline, leaving the apartment steeped in calm. A different kind of calm than before, one that wasn't tentative or waiting. I was no longer anticipating a response. I was simply preparing for what would come. And what came next didn't arrive by text or call, it came by mail. A plain envelope, forwarded from my old address in Columbia, sat on top of the pile of circulars and junk flyers. No stamp. Courier delivered. The sender, Palmetto State Financial Services. I tore it open, not hurriedly, just curious. Inside was a formal letter, dense with legal jargon, but the heart of it was clear enough. Preliminary investigation of fraudulent use of identity for financial gain. The language was clinical, pending claim, discrepancy, responsible party under inquiry. My name appeared 4 times. So did the word triggered, as in triggered by submitted documentation from a third-party legal counsel. Dara's file had done its job. I hadn't asked for this part, but I didn't stop it either. A quiet breath left my chest. I placed the letter in a drawer without flinching. About 30 minutes later, I got the notification. Kimbra had gone live. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made dinner, stir-fried vegetables and rice, and ate standing at the counter. I told myself I wouldn't watch it. I lied. It took 2 minutes to find the reposted version. A grainy, vertical video, her face streaked with tears, makeup smudged like a watercolor gone wrong. "My own sister wants to ruin my wedding week," she said into the camera, her voice shaking. "This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. I can't even trust my own family. I don't even know what I did." She sniffled dramatically. The comments rolled in faster than the captions could keep up. "Stay strong, girl. Family can be so fake. Cut the toxic ones, even if it's blood." Wow, the jealousy is real. I closed the app before it finished. Not because I couldn't stomach it, but because I could. There was nothing surprising about it. Not the performative pain, not the exaggerated framing, not even the silence that followed from my family. Except one voice. My father's. I hadn't heard it in 6 months. After seeing the live video, something in me stirred. Not rage, not even hope. Just a need to hear from someone who was supposed to care. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Ellen?" His voice was cautious, like I was a stranger calling with bad news. "I just need 5 minutes," I said. And I gave him everything. No dramatics, no raised voice. Just the facts. The forged signature, the stolen identity, the fake email account. I even mentioned the investigation letter. He was silent through it all. When I finished, the pause was long. I could hear his breath on the line. Then came the sentence. "You know how your sister is. Why would you let this get so far?" It wasn't anger I felt then. It wasn't even disappointment. It was confirmation. I said nothing else, just hung up. I didn't need to defend my version of events anymore. If he still couldn't see it, if he chose not to see it, then there was nothing left to discuss. I took off my earrings, set my phone to Do Not Disturb, and sat on the floor beside my coffee table. My breath came slow and deep. There's a peculiar clarity that comes with total abandonment. A clean break. No more maybes. No more negotiations. Later that night, I opened Instagram one last time. My name was tagged in a dozen stories. Some I recognized from mutuals. Others were complete strangers dissecting my life like a podcast episode. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to know what version of me they'd pieced together from fragments Kimbra had fed them. I scrolled for a second, then tapped Delete App. Not uninstall, not hide, delete. I placed the phone face down and made tea. Chamomile this time. No sugar. While it steeped, I thought about all the roles I'd played in their narrative. The helper, the provider, the buffer, the problem solver, the silent backup plan, and now, the villain. If their story required me to be the scapegoat, fine. Let them keep the role. I just wouldn't be there to perform it. They could throw their tantrums, post their videos, beg their followers for sympathy. But I wouldn't be participating. My name might be dragged through the mud, but my dignity wasn't going with it. I wrapped myself in a blanket, turned off the kitchen light, and sank into the quiet of my living room. My silence was never weakness. It was survival. In a house where truth wasn't welcome, it was the only armor I ever had. That night, I slept soundly. Not because everything was okay, but because I had finally stopped waiting for things to be. The next morning brought no surprises, no apology, no sudden realization, just the stillness of a life that had shed its noise. I was pouring coffee into a chipped mug when Trula's name flashed on my screen. She rarely called this early unless it was serious. I answered, bracing for something I couldn't name yet. "I need to send you something," she said, skipping the greeting. Within seconds, my phone pinged again. A voice memo, 3 minutes long. "It's from the brunch," she added. "Mom left her phone recording by accident. She was sitting next to your aunt. I thought you should hear it." I plugged in my earbuds and pressed play. Marva's voice came through clearly, too clearly. "Let's just get through this wedding. Ellen's never been the warm one. This isn't her world. She's always been intense." A pause. Some silverware clinking in the background. Then another voice. My aunt, unmistakable with her nasal tone. "She's not even part of this family anymore." "Not really." That was all I needed. I didn't replay it. Once was enough. I placed the phone face down, took a long sip of coffee, and stared out the window. It was overcast again, clouds hanging like questions no one intended to answer. Back at my desk, I logged into my bank account. There was a line of automatic payments scheduled for the next 2 weeks. Marva's health insurance, the co-signed phone bill, Harlan's old SUV registration renewal, an annual dental plan I'd paid into for emergencies. I began canceling them, one at a time. Click, confirm, remove. Each confirmation screen gave me something that words never could. Relief. The last thing I did was log into the DMV site and submit a request to remove my name from the title of the car Harlan drove. He hadn't made a payment in months, and I'd covered the difference without complaint. Not anymore. Once everything was handled, I typed a new letter. Subject: Notice of financial disengagement. Permanent. It was short, precise, final. I printed the document, folded it carefully, and slid it into the same envelope that had been sitting untouched on my dresser for weeks. This time, I wrote 2 words on the front. Not for return. By late afternoon, I opened my freezer, pulled out a meal I'd prepped last weekend, and let it thaw while I grabbed my phone again. I drafted a message to Marva. "I listened to what you said. It was enough." I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the blue send arrow. But I didn't tap it. I tapped back. Then I deleted the message entirely. Instead, I opened my calendar and booked a cabin in the mountains for the coming weekend. 2 nights. No cell reception. Just trees, silence, and space. It wasn't an escape. It was a beginning. Sometimes healing doesn't look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like closing a door so softly no one even hears it. That evening, a weather alert blinked across the bottom of my screen. Arctic cold front approaching. Temperatures expected in the teens. I paused. I remembered how 2 winters ago, I'd sent money for heating oil to keep the old house warm. Harlan had called me in the middle of the night, voice shaking, saying the thermostat had stopped working and Marva was too proud to ask for help. I'd wired the money within 20 minutes. This year, no call, no request, just silence. I didn't send anything. I didn't need to make a statement. I didn't need them to feel punished. But I also didn't need to continue pretending I was still responsible for their comfort. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in a thick knit blanket, and wrote a single sentence in my journal. You don't get to warm a home with silence and take credit for the fire. Outside, the wind began to pick up. I could hear it in the eaves, brushing against the windows like a reminder of all the things I no longer had to carry. I didn't shut the door on them. I just stopped holding it open. By the following Friday, the wind had turned sharper. I took it as a sign. I didn't leave a note. I didn't announce my departure with a text, a post, or even a quiet mention to my neighbors. I just loaded the last box into the back of a rented U-Haul and slid the latch shut. The apartment I had lived in for 5 years, my first home after leaving Columbia, was bare. Empty shelves, echoing footsteps. Only the faint ring on the floor where the coffee table used to sit hinted that I'd ever been there. The new place was in Colorado Springs, a town I had never visited, in a rental I hadn't toured. I didn't need familiar this time. I needed space, distance, and more than anything, I needed to go without asking if it was okay. Leaving wasn't about anger. It wasn't about getting back at anyone. It was about reclaiming the silence they once used against me and reshaping it into something healing. I didn't give a forwarding address. No change of address card filed. The only thing I left behind was the key, resting in the middle of the kitchen counter, like a final punctuation mark. On the drive out of Asheville, I kept the radio low. No music, no podcast. Just the hum of the road beneath me and the occasional sound of my own breathing. Slow, steady, sure. Halfway through Tennessee, I got a text from Hannah, a friend from my old job. Your sister's wedding post disappeared. No explanation, no caption, just gone. I didn't ask why. I didn't go looking for screenshots. The story she built had finally collapsed under the weight of its own fiction, and I no longer needed to see it fall. Marva's number was already blocked, but later that night, as I sat cross-legged on the floor of my new living room, still full of boxes, still smelling like primer, I noticed a new email. No subject. The sender? Harlan. The message read only, Hope you're okay. Mom hasn't been well. That was it. I read it once, maybe twice, then moved it to trash. There was no anger in the action, only the understanding that some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some are meant to burn, quietly, steadily, until nothing remains but the truth. The next morning, I set up the essentials: a desk near the window, a bookshelf with a few of my favorite titles, a potted jade plant I picked up at a market on the way in. I began volunteering at a small library near downtown. 3 mornings a week. No one asked about my past. They just handed me a shelf to organize and thanked me when I was done. It was enough. One night, while journaling in bed, I wrote, I don't want to be remembered as the one who gave up. I want to be known as the one who chose herself. And I meant it. That weekend, after unpacking the last box, I sat down with a blank piece of stationery and wrote a letter I never intended to send. To my family, you taught me to be silent, and I mastered it. You taught me to endure, and I perfected it. But you never taught me how to leave. That part I taught myself. I folded the letter neatly, walked outside, and placed it into the fire pit behind the rental. With one flick of a lighter, the page caught flame. The edges curled inward, like dried leaves in October, the ink turning to smoke and sky. As I watched it disappear, I didn't feel triumph. I felt weightless. The past didn't vanish with the ashes, but it no longer held the pen. I did. That evening, I made a simple dinner: roasted vegetables, jasmine rice, and a quiet glass of wine. I ate on the porch as the sun melted behind the Rockies. There was no applause, no reconciliation, just the slow rhythm of peace coming in like a tide I hadn't realized I'd been waiting on. Sometimes peace doesn't come with forgiveness. Sometimes it walks in quietly after the last goodbye. Before I go, I want to leave you with something. Not just a story, but a truth I had to learn the hard way. Sometimes family isn't where you come from. It's what you choose to protect. And when you're constantly the one keeping the peace, paying the bills, holding your tongue, you're not building a home, you're being buried in it. Walking away wasn't about bitterness. It was about choosing to no longer be complicit in a version of love that demanded my silence and called it loyalty. I don't share this story because I think I'm special. I share it because too many of us, especially women, caregivers, the dependables, have been told our value is in what we endure. That's a lie. Your worth is not measured by how much mistreatment you can survive. It's measured by the boundaries you're brave enough to draw and keep. So I ask you, have you ever been erased in a space where you were the one holding it together? Have you ever let go, not in defeat, but in clarity? I'd love to hear what you've learned from that. Or, if you're still in the middle of it, what you're holding on to. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment with one, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. I read every comment. Let's talk about it. If this story touched your heart, inspired your boundaries, or simply reminded you that you're not alone, hit subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next story. We have so many more voices to hear, and your presence here makes all the difference. Until next time, take care of yourself, loudly.